This is Natasha Henstridge. I know you're really into scary movies, but take this advice. Don't go out there. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
In a world where zombies, ghosts, serial killers, and vampires all exist, it's Nico, Brian, Mike, and Dustin, and they are all that stand between you and the films that could end the world. Welcome to the Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Review Podcast. Just want to thank all our fans and listeners. I really appreciate all support. You guys are awesome. Before we get into tonight's film review, I just want to give a quick shout out to our website, don'tgoouthere.com. We got everything you need to know about this podcast on there. We got all of our episodes, our interviews, our blog, our store. We got new shirts out. We just recently added Shan to our show. We've got her Etsy page attached as well. So if you want to get a Tumblr, check that out. They're awesome. We got all of our social media links on there as well. We got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Please follow us, like us, subscribe us on those platforms. We love interacting with our fans. It helps us reach new people, and we love all our fans. We love chatting with you, so definitely check us out there. And the last thing I'll shout out before we get into our film review is our blood donors, our version of a Patreon. We have two kinds. We have the one-time donation if you want. Let's say you're a big fan of a movie and you want us to review it, or you want to come on the show with us. We have those options available. And we also have the traditional monthly Patreon, the reoccurring kind. Nothing too expensive, but it really helps us pay for this podcast, our hosting, our website, all the good stuff. It takes a big burden off of us, and we really appreciate all support. Tonight is our second entry in the Never Seen It month. Tonight is Brother Mike's pick. Do you want to go ahead and announce your pick?
Yeah, sure. So I picked 2021's Antlers, which, I got to be honest, this is a movie that I remember coming out, and I were like, yeah, that looks interesting. It had a good cast, which I'm going to get to. And then I just never heard anything else about it. I know it had, it got released during a pandemic, so it didn't get the, full treatment that it probably normally would have. But I remember seeing previews for it pretty early on. I'm not sure when the film was made. Maybe one of you guys looked that up, but I remember previews, and then I remember them stopping. And then when everything kind of got going again, I remember them coming back around. And so I believe the release date for this was delayed, if I'm not mistaken. And so I was like, okay, it's hard for me to do Never Seen It month because I've seen so many damn things. And if I haven't seen it, there's probably a reason most of the time. Law Abiding Citizen is an exception because it just slipped through the cracks. But 9 times out of 10, there's a reason I haven't seen a film. Like it's poor. It's not well thought of. It's poorly reviewed. I haven't gone out of my way to see it. This just happens to be new. And so Nico was actually the one that had the idea, pick something new. And that was the first movie I thought of. And I was like, okay, I'm excited to see it. Look, great cast. Love Kerry Russell in this film in particular. I love Jesse Plemons. Shout out to my man Landry, Friday Night Lights, Texas Forever. He's in a lot of other shit. He's in a really fun episode of Black Mirror. He's in so much stuff that I enjoy. But he's really, I think he's really strong here too. I have some problems with his character, but I think his performance itself is really strong. And I think the kid actor, whose name is slipping me right now, I think is really good. Look, I like the movie. And I think it does a really good job of setting an uneasy tone the entire film. I feel like I'm watching something I'm not supposed to. Like I feel like it's an invasion of a family's privacy, almost like the kid's privacy. Like the whole time you kind of feel like you're looking in on something that you're not supposed to see. And I think the story is interesting. I don't think the ending is great, but I definitely don't think it's as bad as I've seen online. That's for sure. So all in all, I thought it was a good film. And I thought when they got stuff right, they got it really right. And mood and tone and atmosphere. And of course, my go-to trope, which is cinematography. I think it's great in this film. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I'll go next. I like the movie as well. I remember when the trailer came out, and I thought, man, that's kind of interesting and creepy. Haven't seen anything like that. Uh, and I watched Found Flix's, review of it today, the ending explained, because I like his channel, I like his thoughts. Kind of agree with him, where it's like after you watch it, you're like, man, that really wasn't what I expected. It was kind of a little bit of a trauma movie as well. I'll touch on it at the end of this review. I really didn't really care about Julia's backstory because it wasn't explained that well to me. So it really just didn't make me sympathize with her. But I'll touch on more of that later. Overall, though, like Mike said, beautiful cinematography and like the scenery. I loved it. Uh, the mind kind of became a character, like he would say, and for other things like the snow or whatever. I feel like the mind, the woods kind of became a character. But I really enjoyed the movie. I got my problems with it, but I thought it was pretty good. I liked it. Brian, you want to go next?
Yeah. So this is the first time I can remember ever saying this about one of our movies. And upon retrospect, I mean, this could probably have been a better description about some of the ones we've done than what I actually said at the time. But to me, Antlers is better as something to analyze than it is to actually watch. That's probably the best way that I can put it. I didn't personally enjoy watching it. I don't really like it. But once you get into the themes the movie tackles, like personal trauma, like Nico mentioned, as kind of the backdrop to the whole thing, I respect it a lot more for what it does do right, like Mike said. But it just doesn't all really work together to me, if that makes any sense at all. Carrie Russell is great as she always is in everything. At first, I was like, why the hell is she in this movie? She's better than this. But then I realized, all right, I think this, like I said, it just about the analyzing it, it sounded probably better on paper. Plus, Del Toro being attached, I'm sure had a lot to do with it. Um, Effects look great, and again, maybe this is good if it's just a supernatural Wendigo movie, or just a trauma thriller, but the two together just didn't really do it for me, and that's frustrating because I feel like that there's a good movie in here somewhere, but I do commend it for doing something different. I'll say that. Although I know it's based on the short story The Quiet Boy, written by Nick and Costa. I've never read that, or nor have I ever seen the 2001 Wendigo movie. So this is actually my first introduction into the whole Wendigo lore completely. But anyway, that's how I feel about it. Go ahead, Dustin.
Yeah. So this movie, I liked it a lot better on my second watch through. My second watch through, when I watched it the first, I was complaining a lot in our group chat. I was like, man, what the hell is this? I got way ahead of my work today, this week at work. And so today I had some time. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to watch this movie at my desk. And that's what I did. I watched this movie at work. And the first half of the movie, to me, drags so much and it doesn't do enough to keep me entertained that I was like, damn, I kind of just want to get back to work. But as it got on, I did appreciate, it captivated me more, and I did enjoy the movie more once you got to a certain point in the movie. It's just, I agree with you, Nico. The Julia's backstory is completely unnecessary because, I get why they did it, because they're like, oh, this is why she's so invested and why she connects to, little Lucas so much, but she's a fucking teacher and a human being, so she doesn't need a reason.
Exactly.
It was completely unnecessary and it didn't have a payoff. Um, Shout out to Julia, though. You mentioned Carrie Russell. Mike and I especially know her as Mr. Feeney's niece. That's Jessica from Boy Meets World.
That's right, brother.
She's never looked better. I think she's a striking lady, so I enjoyed her performance in this movie. Jesse Plemons, I'll always hate him forever for being Todd on Breaking Bad, but his acting is slowly winning me back over, though, because he is a damn good actor. And then you mentioned the child actor Jeremy T. Thomas. I think he knocked it out of the park. He genuinely looked petrified and just depressing this whole movie, and so I thought that was great acting by him. The story, there's just so much potential. I think this movie does a good job of setting the atmosphere, setting the tone, and everything. But I honestly can't remember the last time I watched a movie that was only an hour and 39 minutes long And at the end of it, I thought, God damn, that was the longest 4 hours of my life. Like, it just felt like it took a lot longer than an hour and 39. But that's not to say I didn't enjoy it, because the second half of the movie certainly made up for it. But yeah, I honestly, as I'm talking, I honest to God right now don't know what I'm going to rate this movie at the end. So because I'm so back and forth about, did I like it? Did I not like it? Was it okay? Did I hate it? So um yeah, that's pretty much where I am.
Really
Fair enough.
quick, shout out to director Scott Cooper, who I think this film has some tremendous shots in the film.
Yeah,
There's
agreed.
two I point out directly in my notes, and I'm just like, wow, that's a cool shot right there. So shout out to him for sure. Just I think he did a really good job. The story, if it's not for you, that's one thing. But I think the filmmaking that went into the film is damn fine work.
Oh yeah, I agree, Mike. I think it looks beautiful. All right, any more opening thoughts before you jump into the scene by scene? All right,
Do it.
let's do it. The film starts with text read in a native tongue that says, Mother Earth has been pillaged, stripped of her life's blood. A violation has awakened the malevolent spirit, seeking the lost, the frail, and the depraved. Pray it desires, not you. We now get drone footage over a body of water that takes us to the mines in a foresty, mountainy area. We meet a young boy named Aiden who's walking around bored, and he hears a screeching noise. Aiden runs back to his father's truck and gets in it. His dad, Frank, walks out, and Aiden tells him he heard a noise. Dad says it's just them working. He can't come into the workshop. It's dangerous, he tells him. He tells him, I love you, and he heads back inside. They'll go get Lucas, his brother, shortly. Frank walks back in the mine and hears the growls. He puts on his respirator, or breathing app, or whatever it is, and strikes a flare to see through the dark mines. He makes it to where he and Kenny are running a meth lab. Kenny says they have enough to do another batch, but hear the growls in the mines. They grow worried. They don't know what it is. Kenny gets a gun out, and Frank lights another flare, guiding them out. They see these medicine bags hanging in the mines, but the roars get closer. Kenny says, let's get the fuck out of here. Kenny yells for Frank to run, and we see gunshots. We see the men attacked by an unseen creature. Aiden grows worried and exits the truck and walks in the mine, calling for his daddy. Title card as Aiden fades into the darkness. 3 weeks later, we meet Julia now, who's in the bathroom. Then we see her washing her face at the sink, clearly bothered by something. She's in her classroom now as the principal comes in to watch class. Julia is teaching about storytelling and indigenous people in Oregon. She now asks her class to talk of a fable or myth. She ignores the one kid with her hand up and calls on other students who don't answer. We see Clint bullying Lucas in class as Jasmine talks about Goldilocks. Lucas looks through his bag and sees a doll in his bag, and Clint mocks him. Lucas walks home from school now through a lot of abandoned buildings and gets to the mines. We see Lucas grab a rock to kill a skunk by the edge of the water. And now we see Lucas walking home and into his house with the skunk in a garbage bag. Lucas unlocks his door in his house, and it cuts to Julia at the store, resisting buying alcohol. We hear on the radio on the mine about to open back up as Julia washes dishes. Julia walks up to the piano and plays a few keys, and we see her younger self hiding under the stairs, and her brother Paul, the sheriff, walks in asking how was school. He tells her to give it time, they'll warm up to her. Paul asks if she wants him to move the piano out, and she says no. He says he's going to get some sleep. Julia sees pictures of her dad on the wall, and she takes them down, putting them face down. We're in Lucas' room now, where he looks at a picture of his family, but with his dad folded out of the picture. Lucas now saws off the head of the doll Clint put in his book bag. Lucas hears pounding from the other side of the door. We now hear of an opioid epidemic on the radio as Paul takes his medicine. He asks her not to move his stuff around. She says she's going to move as soon as she can. He now vents to her about having to evict another poor family. Julia says she barely recognizes this place anymore. A lot can change in 20 years, he says, as Paul leaves for work. Julia calls on Lucas to read his story. He tells a creepy story about 3 bears that lived in a dark, wet cave. Big Bear, Little Bear, and Baby Bear. Big Bear got sick and lost his job, and his insides turned black. Little Bear came home, and Big Bear and Baby Bear were sick and different. They were mean and angrier because they had no meat. It's very good, Julia tells him, but they had each other, he says. He sits down and closes his book with all these creepy drawings. Clint finds in his book bag the doll head covered in dog shit now. Clint tries to shove Lucas's head into it. Julia breaks it up and takes Lucas to the nurse. Julia gets Lucas info sneakily to pay him a visit at home. We see the camera zoom in on the lock of the locked door, and we see a creepy face as Julia calls Lucas's home. All right, Brian, go ahead. That's the opening.
Oh my God! You killed Kenny, you bastards! Hey, was that joke like 20 years old? I don't. I just didn't see another opening that I could ever say that. Oh my God, you guys killed Kenny in any movie that we've ever done. So anyway, went ahead with it. Anyway, beautiful opening shots. Little fun fact right off the bat is this is actually filmed in the same location as Rambo First Blood. When I read that, now you can see it, and I know that's 40 years ago, which wow, but it still looks remarkably the same to me. And so let me get this out of the way early. And there's a ton of times that I'll bring this up throughout. And again, I didn't read the short story, but I don't think the movie does do a good job with Frank. Like later on, it almost tries to force this parallel abuse story between Lucas and Julia's own story, which I'll get to that when we get there. But everything we see from Frank is like, yeah, I mean, he has this tragic life, and yeah, he's resorted to making meth, but everything we see from him is loving towards his kids. I mean, his interactions with them. I mean, it's one thing if you showed them like, I mean, like Beverly's father in It or something, where he's, on the drugs and, abusive towards them. But I mean, yeah, it implies it in the hospital part that he was, abusive or whatever. But that was before his wife's death, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I mean, to me, it's more tragic in that he's trying to resort to this to feed his family. His wife's dead. He's trying to take care of his kids because I mean the mine shut down. He lost his job. I mean, Frank, I do. I mean, you think obviously he makes bad decision and almost like hopeless situation. But I don't know. It gets more. I'll get more into it. But I don't like how it tries to kind of paint him as a bad dad, but it clearly never shows him being one. I guess that's. I guess I said all that to say that. I mean, hell, it shows the opposite here with him and Aiden in the truck. Scott Rowland actually plays Frank, by the way, and he's been in Venom, Jurassic World Dominion. He actually looked a lot like Joe Chill from Batman Begins, if you've seen that. But that's Richard Brake. It's not him. I just wanted to say that he looked like him. All the stuff in the mine, I think, is shot really well. I will say, and I know it made for a better cinematic effect. And I've never cooked meth, but it appears to me that a flashlight would have probably worked better than a flare around such a flammable substance. Just throwing that out there. And something that I know others online have mentioned as well. What the hell happens to this Wendigo? Like, they don't kill it, and Frank turns into it. So, are there two? Or are we to assume that he killed it? I mean, obviously, I can't assume he ripped the heart out because, I mean, he didn't know to do that. So, I mean, and what happened? So, what happened to this one? I mean, obviously, those quote unquote wards, those bags of whatever it was, I forgot, those hanging bags, they don't do shit because I mean that's not really discussed anymore. I mean it is shown in the movie, but they don't really discuss it, I guess, except when they say what they are. But they were right underneath them this entire time. Wendigo 1 attacks them, so I guess fuck them bags because they didn't work worth shit. Julie is 23 in the original short story. Here she appears to be in her 40s, which I'm sure she obviously has, I'm sure that has to do with like, hey, if you can get Carrie Russell, you get Carrie Russell. Plus, again, I haven't read it, but if you're going to have the alcoholism backstory too, like that wouldn't resonate as much if she was 23. Whereas like Russell portrays someone who struggled with this for much for life. And I like the alcoholism backstory. It just doesn't play a part here at all. I mean, it's just, I like the trauma she's dealing with as a character development, but like I said in my opening, it's not fleshed out enough to be in the same movie. And Dustin mentioned it; it doesn't have a payoff at all. Just my opinion too. Also, by the way, they don't have power, but someone paid the phone bill. I guess just wouldn't that have just made more sense if it disconnected when she tried to call their house? But just throwing that out there as well. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. So I think this is and Dustin touched on this, so I'll start with this. I actually like the first half of this film because it's a little bit of a slow burn, but I understand the complaint that it drags. Trust me, got that. But as far as hooking me, really early on, it gets me with the story. First of all, I have no idea what a Wendigo is, and I'll be honest, I didn't know what it was even at the end of the film, to be quite frank. But that's okay. I mean, I know what it is, but I don't know its lore or anything like that. But yeah, so right off the bat, you get something that kind of tugs at your heartstrings. It's a kid, he's waiting for his dad. You turn on a horror movie, that's not going to end well. So you're kind of expecting something. And one thing I will say, as good as the cinematography is, it was hard to see some of these scenes in the shadows, some of the dark stuff with the Wendigo, but I feel like that was on purpose, maybe. If that's the case, I understand it. It was just hard for me to kind of make out exactly what was happening there in the opening. I love I love the character of Julia. Um, I agree with what you guys are saying that her trauma isn't as fleshed out as I would like it, but I like that she has it as a character development. And I understand the thing of her just being his teacher, and that should be enough for her to take interest. But I like that they're linking them together, suffering this trauma of. I mean, Brian touched on it. They don't ever actually show the dad being abusive, but I do think mentally this whole my dad became a fucking thing with Antlers is is accidentally abusive, I guess. He's going through a very traumatic process where his dad's a beast and his little brother has turned into a some kind of animal himself. And so I think the two having those traumatic experiences kind of link them together in that way. I mean, as from her point of view, of course, she's going to see that as abuse because she has no idea that it's her dad is or that his dad is some kind of animal human hybrid or whatever the fuck. So again, I like that the two characters linked there. Jeremy T. Thomas as Lucas, I think, is also really good, especially in these these opening scenes. I think him at the desk, quiet, shy, looks like a really sad kid, and I think it's portrayed so well. Who the hell is this little nerd that kept making fun of him? He looks like the kid from A Christmas Story.
Christmas Story.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, he really did. It was quite canny. I was like, man, what the hell? Did he have a kid? Like, what's going on here? But yeah, so not only does he have to deal with the stuff at home, but he's being bullied at school as well. So you feel bad for this kid. And I like the dynamic between Paul and Julia. Like, I think that brother sister. I wish, again, like you guys have mentioned, they had fleshed that out a little more. What exactly, how their relationship kind of separated and all that stuff. I kind of wish it had been fleshed out just a smidge more. But I do like the fact that it's a brother and sister kind of trying to reconnect and all of that stuff. And Jesse Plemons plays a great sheriff, by the way, or like a great cop, which is not something I ever would have tagged him for. Just given his other characters, Dessa mentioned Breaking Bad. Again, Landry in Friday Night Lights plays the asshole in that episode of Black Mirror. And so I think that he's cast so well here. I love their on-screen dynamic. I think that one last thing, a lot of the shots in this opening, like the very, very open, they're great. Now they're I'm surprised that Brian liked them because they became a little Kubrick-esque at the beginning there. But I do think they're really good now. They don't run on as long, but
They weren't. They weren't near as long.
Yeah, and by the way, shout out to Amy Madigan as the principal, who's in a lot of other shit that I've seen. I want to say she's Buck Russell's girlfriend and Uncle Buck, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but I could have swore I remember her being in that. And if she's not, I'm terribly sorry. But she's in a lot of other shit that I've seen. So shout out to her as well.
So the initial, the open we get with Lucas, wandering around, then going and getting back in the truck, that's sad as fuck. Like, this guy is leaving his kid out in the truck and telling him, don't move, Dad'll be right back. I'm going to go down and cook a little meth. Like, I get what you're saying, Brian. Like, he's not explicitly abusing him by doing that, but goddamn, man, like, don't just stop making drugs. Get a job. Yeah, no, like, I wouldn't say abusive, but it's like, you have a obligation to you have a responsibility when you have a kid, and you can't be putting yourself in danger of going to jail at any given moment by cooking drugs. If the town's that desolate, then move, go somewhere else. And then we find out later that how many times he's been revived with Narcan and stuff. So he is, he gets the Man Fuck Them Kids award just for being, because if he wasn't done that mind making drugs, and this whole movie wouldn't have been a movie. Then, I don't like the whole backstory thing like at all. It's not that I wish it had a payoff. I wish it would have just been eliminated because it didn't add anything for me. I can see what you're saying, Mike. Like it does show that they have that connection, but the connection just wasn't necessary for the story to me. Um, I do think that Julia's character is strong enough, and Paul's character is strong enough to where you just you don't need it. But the pacing of this opening scene it's okay. They haven't lost my attention yet. They haven't done anything to explicitly grab me because we hear a lot of wild animal noises and everything, but we don't see anything. So it's really kind of you're at the very least curious as to what animal is doing this. But I don't know. I'm still on the fence at this point whether I like it or if I don't. It's just the atmosphere is great. I love the way it's shot. The cinematography is great. The score throughout this whole movie is great. But at this point, I'm still teetering just because I don't know. I think like I told Nico this earlier, and I was half joking, half serious. Like I kind of get a Babadook-esque kind of feeling to this movie, where it's the pacing just reminds me of it, and the lighting of every scene just kind of reminds me of that tone that they're trying to set. And so it's just I can see how it's appealing. It's just I'm not 100% sold on it through the opening set of scenes.
Yeah, one other thing, like a second rewatch, this entire scene in the classroom tells you like basically exactly what's going on with the story and the everything. And I think Found Flick said it the best, so I wanted to give him credit. You get a classroom scene in a horror movie, you better fucking pay attention because I mean, they're going to tell you what's up.
And that was another thing that I meant to touch on. I completely missed or glossed over it, but the classroom scene. What the fuck's up with the kid humping his sock monkey? And
Oh, asshole.
like, what? Why? What the fuck? And then he goes outside, and I don't have kids in school, so I can't. I'm not the expert on this, but do they make kids leave their backpacks outside the schools now? That was kind of weird to me. Um, and then he goes outside, looks in his backpack, makes sure that his precious sock monkey's okay, and looks over his shoulder, and the bully's just sitting there making sexual gestures towards him. Like, what the fuck is that about? Because there's no like, maybe bullies are just built different these days, but that's not how bullying was done. Was that when I was in school? So that was very weird.
Really quick, one thing I will say is I know we're supposed to pay attention in the classroom scene. By the way, I love that classroom scene, that initial one. Also, her not calling on the girl that kept raising her hand reminded me in the scene in School of Rock when Miranda Cosgrove had her hand raised and he kept calling on other people. Anyway, or he ignored her. Anyway, my point was they take a really long time in this movie to kind of tell us the story of the Wendigo. And I think you could have maybe told that in this classroom scene a little bit deeper, in my opinion. But because you spend the whole time, and I get it, they're building the suspense, but you spend the whole movie kind of wondering what we're dealing with here, and we don't really know because we just clicked on a movie called Antlers, and we think it's just going to be some big killer deer, and they don't really do a very good job, in my opinion, early on, kind of describing exactly what we're going to get. I just wish maybe in this classroom scene when they go into myths and fairy tales and, ancient native folklore, maybe they could have gotten into the backstory a little bit more. That's all.
I agree with that.
All right, Julia walks out of school and decides to follow Lucas. She meets up with him at the local ice cream shop and asks if he wants to join her. She now makes small talk about fruits and veggies. She now asks about his brother. He asks how she knew he had a brother. If you knew everything, you knew my mom was dead, he tells her. She now tells him her mom is dead too. Died when she was 12. He says he's 12 too. She asks more about his brother and if he's in school with them. He's always with Dad. She asks what Dad does, and he says he's got to go and for her not to follow him. Lucas walks home past the mines again. He sees buzzards circling in the air and follows them. He finds I think it's a raccoon, but it's some dead carcass, and we see Julia arrive at Lucas's house. Lucas pulls out a plastic bag to collect the remains. Julia walks up to the front door and is creeped out when she knocks and the door opens. She hears footsteps and growling. She hears banging now and leaves and goes back to her car. She's at home now assembling the torn picture she found from school Lucas drew. Very creepy. Paul jump scares her when she didn't hear him. He asks, is this the kind of thing she taught in California? She calls for him and says, you have every right to resent me. She says she couldn't stay in this house anymore. She spent her life trying to deal with leaving him and resolving her issues. He says he spent his life hoping she'd come back. We now see Lucas butchering up the carcass. He takes the plate of meat upstairs to his sick brother and father. The father crawls swiftly to the plate, growling as he eats the meat, then backs away. The brother Aiden crawls to the plate now and eats. Lucas says he'll bring more later after Dad is asleep, and Lucas relocks the door. Julia is playing piano now, and we see someone walk up behind her slowly. She has flashbacks from her childhood of her father touching her inappropriately. Then she sees her dad on a bed naked holding a bear. Kind of a weird scene. She says, you're hurting me, and she's scared again by Paul. She apologizes for freaking out. He says he just wants to talk and clear the air. She asks if he knows Frank Weaver. He cited and revived him with Narcan several times. She tells him the drawing is from his son. She asks why isn't Frank in jail. He says Protective Service said he was adequate enough to be their guardian, so what can he do? She tells him of the events she experienced at the house. We now see Lucas drawing some more, and he hears Aiden now saying he's hungry, and he cries. Lucas puts headphones on to tune it all out. Lucas is in the woods setting up a trap until he hears someone walking nearby. He hides, and we see a man who finds the other half of Kenny's dead body. Julia is looking through Lucas's desk and sees a Bible, a Danger Spirit book, and a book on animal trappings, and a notebook full of his creepy drawings. We see Julia and the principal looking through it. Ellen says this is very disturbing. She talks of several students being homeschooled to keep the authority from smelling methamphetamines on them. Ellen says next chance she gets, she'll reach out to Lucas's father. Julia is back at the store and she walks out avoiding alcohol again. Julia sees Warren talking to Paul and Dan about the body he found. Paul tells Julia he found part of a man. Half the body was in the woods, the other half in a meth lab in the mines. I don't think Jesus was anywhere to be found, Paul says. Paul and Dan leave to go meet the coroner. All right, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, you guys brought up Jesse Plemons earlier, but I want to give him his flowers too. You talked about Breaking Bad and that episode, that Star Trek episode of Black Mirror, basically. But Game Night, he was in that too, and I loved him in that. Thought it was hilarious. I think he's a phenomenal actor. It's nice to see him not being a total weirdo or an asshole in a movie for once. I think he has a lot of the late Philip Seymour Hoffman vibes to him, which to me is a huge compliment in my opinion. Um, Mike touched on this. His and Julia's moments together as siblings, I think, are great. I think they do a good job of making that, believable. But again, without all of this trauma really coming back to play a part in this movie at all, or the story arc, I mean, what's the lesson Julia learns in this movie? I mean, yeah, it's tragic that she has all this abuse, and it gives her that reason to help Lucas, I guess, like we discussed. But I agree with Dustin. I don't think we need it at all. I just don't feel like it makes sense. And like I said in my opening, I think this is a great character development for a different story. Um, and yeah, Nico, what the fuck is the deal with her dad being naked, shaking on the bed? Like that's almost equivalent to that oral sex scene with the guys dressed up like bears in The Shining. I was like, what the fuck is going on?
I thought the exact same thing.
And it's just
That's the same
never
kind of vibes.
explained. I was just like, all right, what? And yeah, I also want to give props to Jeremy Thomas, especially in this ice cream scene with him and Russell. It's phenomenal acting by him, I think, to hold your own in a scene with Kerry Russell, which he does many times throughout this entire movie. Huge acting chops there. And the scene where he's up in bed and Aiden's calling for him, saying he's hungry, is absolutely heartbreaking scene. And lastly, I would like to point out that a light is on the first time that Julia pulls up to the Weaver's house. I thought they didn't have power, but light's clearly on outside. And I thought it was weird that the door opened up by almost like some ghostly force after she knocks on it. Like, if it knocked because, or if it opened because of the force of her knocking, it wouldn't have taken so long to open. So I thought that was kind of weird. It just didn't, it make sense or play to me. And I'm sure Wendigo Frank appreciates you taking the time to chop up that dead possum he found, Lucas. I mean, that also seemed unnecessary to show, much less do. I'd rather have just them shown how he got that leftover food box for his brother with no money. Just throwing that out there too. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the scene at the ice cream shop is great. Probably one of my favorite scenes in the film, just because it's so golly, it tugs at your heartstrings. It really does. I think it's phenomenally acted by both. You know, you mentioned Jeremy Thomas holding his own. Damn right he does. He makes the scene. His timidness, his shyness to kind of tell his whole story. And Julia, the character, kind of tries to level with them a little bit, relate with them. You know, they both, both their moms are dead. And her dad abused her, and she thinks that his dad is abusing him, and so trying to kind of relate that, get him some ice cream, like he's a normal kid. But I got to tell you, after this experience, he's no longer a normal kid. It's going to be kind of hard to buy his talking with ice cream, and I think the character here, I think he gets that across so well. It's a great scene, and I love the line, I got to go, don't follow me this time. Like that is so, that's a kid that really doesn't want anybody up in his business right now. And I think he's a great character. Really, really good. Um, you're right. The scene with the dad naked on a bed with a bear or whatever, it's strange, but it's kind of, I mean, yeah, I got the same vibes as you guys, but also, and again, it's a weird scene. But to me, I think it was enough character development for me to understand a little more of the abuse, the trauma that she went through. Now, we don't get to see everything, but the fact that that was something she's reliving means it happened, which means some inappropriate touching sexual stuff obviously went on there, and it got up to really weird levels. So again, just having that be a little out there to me lets me know, oh, she's been through some really weird and strange things, kind of like the counterpart here. So I think it's good. Um, and again, I like these scenes between Paul and Julia. I like their on screen chemistry. I think that her kind of like trying to you know make amends here. Um, when we don't now, I will say, as much as I like the character development, the story still isn't fleshed out enough between the brother and sister. So her kind of trying to make amends doesn't really fit for me. As far as Lucas's home life, this is the kind of first glimpse we get to see of Frank and his brother, and I think that they look great as far as effects and everything else. I think they look really, really good. They're scary, or at least Frank is. And it's the first time you get to kind of see him feed, if you will. And I think outside of cutting up the possum, like you mentioned, it's it's disturbing. It's a disturbing thing to see, and I think it just adds a little layer of me not. Again, I kind of said it in my opening, and maybe I didn't put it in the words I wanted to, but I kind of feel like I'm seeing stuff I'm not supposed to. Um, and I know the character of Julia trying to help Lucas, but on that same token, it kind of feels like she's poking and prodding a little bit. And I kind of feel like as an audience member, we're seeing stuff that Lucas doesn't want us to see. And that's the uneasiness I have throughout all the scenes that involve Frank and the brother and him. And I think, this is just another example of that.
All right, so the ice cream shop scene I think was great. I thought it was a great dialogue from teacher and student there. Just making small talk. What's your favorite vegetable? Mine's ice cream. And what's your favorite fruit? I count cheeseburgers. All that shit. I love that. And it was heavy shit when she was like, is he with your mom? And he's like, well, if you knew everything, my mom's dead. That was great job there, and I like how he kind of played coy to the whole situation, got his ice cream, and then was like, by the way, bitch, I know you followed me. Stop that. Like, I like his little delivery there at the end. He's like, by the way, don't follow me. Julia and Paul's relationship. Here's a way that I enjoy this movie more. Scratch the whole backstory between her and her dad and the abuse and the naked teddy bear cuddles on the bed and the piano shit. Don't need all that creepiness. Don't need her returning home. Make them just like father or a husband and wife. He's a cop, she's a teacher, and that's it. Because it doesn't, to me, it just doesn't add enough to make it worth all this stuff. Her, walking past the alcohol. Honestly, I didn't even notice that she was, walking past the alcohol, and like it just didn't stand out enough. There was no payoff to it. If it came back into play later and you saw that she was off the bottle again, and like, oh, or if it came back and she's trying to convince Paul later, I need you to trust me, and he's like, how can I trust you? You deserted us all those years ago. Haha. There's payoff. There's not. The only thing they try to do is just draw, pull on your heartstrings and get that emotional connection and make you sympathize with her and try to strengthen the bond that she has with Lucas. But again, I think you have a strong enough bond already just because of how shitty Lucas's home life is. And we can all empathize with that. We can all be like, damn, if I was a teacher and I know that one of my students is struggling, like that would suck. So to me, that's all you needed. And I would have just much rather it be Paul and Julia were not brother and sister, that they were husband and wife. And this is a situation that's going on with one of her students. To me, it streamlines the whole thing, cuts out a lot of the fluff that doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't pay off. And this, to be honest with you, this is the set of scenes to where my attention started to drift and wander at times. And it's not for any reason other than just wasn't enough happening to keep my attention. There's a lot of backstory here. There's a lot of, there's a lot of great acting. There's a lot of great script writing. There's a lot of great dialogue. But it just I've really had to force myself to pay attention. I don't know if I was needing a Ritalin or something, but I was struggling to get through this set of scenes and actually pay attention to it. But so it can only go uphill from here.
All right, Lucas is with Aiden again, and Aiden asks if God is dead. That's what Dad said. We see Frank in the corner writhing. Me and you were born under the lucky stars, Mama said. Lucas gives Aiden something crunchy to eat, and Aiden begins to cough violently and bleed from his eyes. Lucas exits swiftly. The coroner says determining cause of death was impossible. The coroner says the teeth marks on the bones look almost human. The coroner is obviously disturbed and unsure of what happened. Overhead shot of Ellen driving as she makes it to Frank's house. Someone looks out the window to see Ellen arrive. Ellen knocks on the door after walking around the porch. We're in class now as the students watch an old school film, and Julia stares at Lucas as he carves on a piece of wood. I guess knives are allowed in school in Oregon. Ellen walks inside the house and she notices how bad the smell is. She calls for Frank. She hears footsteps above her. Lucas has made what looks like a deer head with giant antlers. She follows Aiden's cries and opens the locks to the attic. She coughs even harder now from the terrible stench. She uses her phone light and sees blood all over the walls. She sees Aiden and asks what he's done to her. Frank attacks her from behind, and we see his heart glowing red, or orange, dark orange. Frank bites her hand, then bites her neck. Frank now begins to eat her face. The man is beyond rabid. We now see Frank coughing and begin to transform, and then something bursts out of his mouth and body. The cops show up to the mines now where they found the other half of his body. Paul asks Warren about the medicine bags, but doesn't answer. He asks Warren if the antlers are from a buck, but they aren't. Paul gets a radio about a missing person. Paul and Dan leave. We now see Lucas walking along the train tracks, and he hears grumbling. Lucas cuts through the woods, and Clint the bully stops him, calling him a very inappropriate word, and says the teacher ain't here to save him this time. We now see an antlered creature descend from the tree and violently attack Clint, ravaging his body as Lucas runs home. Lucas notices Ellen's car and goes inside to see the attic unlocked and blood all over the hallway floor, and something has broken through the window. Paul asks Julia when's the last time she heard from Ellen. We see Lucas covering Ellen's car and cleaning all the blood on the floor. Julia says she asked her to talk to Frank. Paul and Dan are at Frank's and complain of the stench. They knock on the door, but Lucas doesn't answer the knocks. The two officers leave and say they'll get a warrant for tomorrow. Paul is at school talking to Julia and Clint's mother. Clint is missing now. Paul tells her that it's all just coincidence. Julia walks out frustrated. She calls him out saying, "You know it's not a coincidence." And Julia looks in a classroom and sees Lucas very downtrodden. All right, go ahead, Brian.
So yeah, Aiden's line about God seemed odd to me. Like maybe I'm the only one that kind of, I don't know, it seemed a little bit out of place. But hell, why is Aiden infected with this thing anyway? I mean, I didn't touch on it in the opening because I already run my mouth so much, but the opening of the movie basically implies that the Wendigo is meant to purge the world of evil men. Okay, that's justified with Frank, I guess, for the drug dealing, the mining and stuff. But what's the deal with Aiden being infected? I mean,
For the sins of the father, the child shall pay.
um, will he? So, all right, will he eventually turn into a Wendigo, or does the other one have to die first? Like, which I kind of thought that was implied at the end when it kind of jumps to him. I mean,
Yeah.
I get you're infected until you eat human flesh and then you just are one. I mean, okay, but it's that, and you can jump bodies after you're dead. I, I don't. I mean,
I don't know the rules of this bullshit, man. To be honest with you, that's another gripe I have. You know, I've mentioned it several episodes before how the powers aren't defined, or they're just kind of making it up as they go and using stuff as a cop out. I don't understand the powers of this Winnebago either. It's really not defined.
the Winnebago. But yeah, you're right. Look, and I've said it many times. I don't have to know everything, but in a movie to me, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Something would have been nice, or like nothing at all. Like, don't give me the Wendigo. I almost called it a Winnebago. Thanks, Dustin. But don't give me the Wendigo Native American explanation at all. It's like you try to explain it, but then you stop and then contradict yourself when you're explaining. So yeah, Nico. I mean, we joke about it, but you're right. Maybe I just don't get this fucking movie. But it's way past time in this movie for me to give full credit to the effects in this. Like Mike said, they're top notch without question. Legacy Effects was responsible for the practical Wendigo creature and the other effects, while Vancouver-based LSFX provided the majority of the CG that was used. Also credit to Kaylee Geen and Caitlin Groves, who is responsible for Aiden's onset makeup. It's all just phenomenally done, all of it. This transformation looked crazy fucking good too. Also, the shot of Clint getting killed in the background here, and it kind of blurred out to an extent. Phenomenal shot there, I thought, by Scott Cooper, who, yeah, Mike mentioned who's the director. But I haven't said anything about Cooper. He did Gods and Generals, pretty much the only thing that he's ever done that I've actually seen. But I think I agree. I think he did a phenomenal job with the movie. The stuff that I don't like in this movie, it pretty much has to do with the writing and nothing that he did or that I see on film, really. The last thing I want to bitch about here is Paul and Dan. They're saying that there's the stench of death at the house at the God. What was their last name? Was it Weaver? Wait, was it Weaver? I can't remember.
Yeah, Weaver.
Okay, yeah, but that's absolutely 100% probable fucking cause to enter the house with the possibility of kids being in danger inside. But you leave, and then you let Julia do all the detective work the next day in this whole next set of scenes coming up. So I don't know. I thought that was dumb too. Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't take a whole lot on this set of scenes because I think these are kind of set up scenes to get us to the last two big chunks that I think are a little bit more interesting. But I also said here that I didn't quite get the line from Aiden about is God really dead and all of that stuff. It kind of came out of nowhere because we're mixing folklore, mythical tales with the Bible, and it's just kind of a weird mix to me. My only thing after kind of sitting here and thinking on it is that's just maybe something that they both got from their mom. Being a little more religious, having even Lucas kind of mentions what their mom used to say to them and all that stuff. So maybe there's just a little bit of that connection. That's the only thing I can think of because otherwise, super out of left field. Another thing on this set of scenes, God, that little shit got what he deserved. Not that a little kid deserves to get ripped apart by Wake Me Up Before You Go, but
Wait. Say that again?
What? Something I said?
Did you just call it a Wake Me Up Before You Go? All right, roll credits. We're not topping that this week.
I did indeed. call it that. Yeah, but I mean, it rips this little shit to shreds. Aren't we wish that we had seen it a little more? I know it's a kid's death, but I think I've said on the show many times I'm okay when the movie has the balls to kill a kid, uh, especially in a brutally violent attack like that. But you know, I mentioned the effects, and you just did as well. Shout out to them. I love the way this. I'm gonna just go with Wendigo for now, so I can get through with this. But I love the way it looks. It's very cool, very different, a unique looking film monster. I will say one thing I like about the film is it is a film with a monster as its villain, but I would not consider this a monster flick. Um, when you think about, I mean, all the classic monster movies, Jaws, things like that, that are kind of stereotypical. This has, a man-eating, animal-eating, whatever monster deer thingamabob, Winnebago, but it looks really cool, and so shout out to them as well. I will say that as much as I like the character of Paul, my man starts to become a worse cop than Dewey right here, as they just kind of
Hey,
smells
hey.
it. I said a worse cop.
Yeah, but you said that like
I'm
that's hard to
implying-
do.
Anyway.
Wow.
Moving on. Hey, great in screen. Hey, excuse me. He was great in Five Cream. Anyway.
And Scream 4. So technically, you're gonna have to start like saying, okay, hey,
he's
1
okay
through
in
3,
Scream.
he's not that great. Oh, actually, he's on.
And he was the highlight of Screen 3 outside of Jay and Silent Bob.
I don't know about that, man.
All right,
Anyway.
we're off the rails.
Oh yeah, we are. Okay, reeling it back in. My last thing was about the kind of shoddy police work here by Paul and partner. Excuse me, his name was Dan the man, but Dan was not the man because he was a shitty cop because they just showed up and then they fucking left, even though the house smelt like total ass. That should be a fucking red flag to keep going. Anyway, sorry. But yeah, that's all I had. Again, I think this is the point, and maybe Dustin disagrees with me, but this is the only set of scenes to me where the movie really dragged a little bit, and I'm ready to get into the meat of the film, which is definitely the next set of scenes, because I think it really starts to turn up a little bit after this.
I agree it turns up after this, but this set of scenes to me caught my attention or brought my attention back from the last set of scenes because we got some action. So for one, I agree. It's very strange. Aiden's affliction is very strange for a couple reasons. Like number one, why is he afflicted at all? Because like you said, Brian, I don't fully understand the terms and conditions that come with this iPod. And number two, I don't understand why it's affecting him so slowly. Like I really don't. Maybe I missed it, but like he's pretty much fine the entire movie. He just looks like he got out of the soup line. He looks dirty as fuck, and so he's sick. What whatever. He can still form sentences. He's still articulate. He just is dirty looking. I sent you guys the meme, and I posted on Twitter too. Like when we get to see Papa Lucas ripping Ellen's face apart, his chest is glowing orange like that meme of depicting heart pain. And so really, I think this whole situation could have been avoided if he just take a baby aspirin in the morning. But it is what it is. The antlers coming out the mouth when he kills Ellen, or after he kills Ellen, like that was kind of a oh shit moment for me, because then it's like, okay, it's not just he's got a glowing orange chest. It's something's happening. He's transforming. And so that's why like this set of scenes captured my attention a little bit more, because we got a couple deaths in it, but more importantly, this motherfucker's birthing a deer out his mouth. So that's kind of cool. I will say though, I agree with you, Mike. I wish that we got to see that bully get his comeuppance a little bit more. Like if you're going to kill a kid and the fucker deserves it, then let's see it. Let's see it. Show me. But for what it is, the tail end of this set of scenes really got me back on board with it. So for all the problems I've had with it up to now, or the pacing especially, I'm back on board. And so this is where it starts to be like, wait, do I like this movie? So stay tuned.
Really quick, the scene you mentioned where antlers are coming out of his mouth, that was one of the ones that are kind of shot in the dark and in the shadows. It was hard as fuck to see. The first time
Yeah.
I watched it, I couldn't tell what the fuck was coming out of his mouth.
Yeah, so same. I'm glad you mentioned that because I forgot to. The first time I watched this movie, I watched it in my bedroom and with the lights off, just TV on, and I didn't actually see that. But today, when I was watching it on my phone, I like had the phone angled to where the lighting was finally to where I could actually see what was happening in some of these scenes, and that's when I caught it. I was like, "Oh shit!" Because at first you just kind of hear a crunching noise, like his jaws maybe coming dislodged or something. But when I actually saw the antlers poking out, that's when I was like, "Holy shit!" And I think a lot of horror movies do that. They want to get the atmosphere and the lighting and the mood so perfect that a lot of times they fuck themselves by making it too dark. And this one's definitely a victim of that.
Julia drives out to Frank's house and notices the car that's parked where she was. She notices it's Ellen's car. The cops are there now, and Ellen's body is ravaged. They find Frank and a child's footprints. They find Frank's charred, destroyed corpse as well. Looks like something burst out of him. Julia stops Lucas from going in the house. The doctor who examined Lucas now tells Julia and Paul that he's concerned. He's very dehydrated and malnourished. They're keeping him for a bit of time. He's very damaged. Paul asks when can he interview him. The little fella's got a long road ahead of him. Doctor says he's been subject to abuse for some time. Paul says they can't keep him. Julia says he has nowhere to go or no family. Julia says he is my responsibility. Paul says this is not about you, it's about getting him help. Don't put our past on him. Julia is angry. Paul says you have no idea what Dad did to him after she names off what he did to her. Julia storms out. We see Lucas lying in the hospital bed as he has a flashback to him and Aiden trying to talk to their daddy about what's happening to him. Frank makes the locks for the door and tells them he is very sick. Lock the door and don't unlock it no matter what. Lucas tells Frank that Aiden is sick. Frank pulls him inside with him and slams the door. Lucas screams from the trauma. Paul and Julia is with Warren and asks about the medicine bags and shows him Lucas's drawings. He can't believe it when she says he's not native. Warren shows them an antler from the mine and shows them in a book. It was a Wendigo, a diabolical wickedness that consumes mankind. He explains the backstory of the Wendigo. It was a hiker turned cannibal that transforms and eats people. It has an insatiable appetite. Paul says it's just a myth, a cautionary tale to the indigenous. Feasting makes it hungry and weaker. You can only kill it by extinguishing its beating heart. Paul gets a radio from Dan. They found a body by the tracks and it's real bad. Paul gets to the scene and Dan tells him it's Clint Owens. The coroner doesn't even know where to start. Paul says, please say it was the train. He says he was eaten in half. Dan asks what the hell is going on. Paul tells Julia he doesn't believe in this mythological nature beast. Julia says to take her to the hospital. They walk out the hospital with Lucas. Dan gets to Paul's house. Paul asks for him to look around. He's wrapping up with the mayor and will be there shortly. Julia asks Lucas if he needs anything. Julia now tells Lucas her dad died too, recently, and he did it to himself. Lucas asks if she loved her father. She says she moved back here to be with her brother. They lived in this house, and she missed him. Dan hears a screeching noise while he looks around. Julia tells Lucas your dad died, and he denies it. She tells him Paul found his body. That was my old sick dad who was mean. My new dad is with Aiden who doesn't understand. I just have to feed him so he loves me. Lucas shows her the drawings. He'll comfort me to be with him in the mines. Julia hears the screeches. He's here, Lucas says. Dan radios to Paul that something is here. I think it's in the shed. Paul races home. Julia doesn't answer any call. She takes Lucas away into another room. Dan opens the shed and sees Aiden in there hiding under some blankets. The Wendigo appears behind Dan and impales him with the antlers through his chest, killing him. And the next set of scenes are the ending. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the set of scenes, we end up with Julia finding Ellen's car, and then bam, it cuts, and the police are inside. The very next scene. So, I mean, I'm not really sure the point of the whole last set of scenes was with the cops going and deciding not to do it, then having her show up, and then bam, the cops are back. So, like, didn't that seem counterproductive? Like, why wouldn't you just write the cops going in and finding this stuff to begin with? I don't know. anyway, I do love the scene in the hospital between Julie and Paul. I do think it's ridiculous that Lucas can hear the doctor like they're in the same room when they're clearly down the hall, but okay. But her blowing up at Paul and then Paul saying, "You have no idea what he did to me." Great fucking line. I mean, slow golf clap. Great fucking line. But again, like there's what I was talking about earlier, a little bit more contradiction here with the doctor saying that Lucas has been subject to abuse, physical, sexual, I don't know, just abuse. But when it shows the flashback with Frank and the boys, that would have been a good time to maybe show or imply something worse was maybe going on, but it didn't. It showed Frank realizing he was sick, installing locks to protect them both, and then taking Aiden in when he realized he was sick to protect Lucas. I mean, that doesn't show anything but a dad trying to protect his kids to me. I don't know. I just think it could have been done better and not sound so contradicting to me. And shout out to the legend Graham Green, by the way, playing the ex sheriff. I think is it Stokes? I think that was his name. Uh, Green Mile. Green Mile Dances with Wolves, Maverick. That dude's a goddamn legend. I mean, perfect guy to play this part as well. Although he gives you the plot devices that really, I mean, it tells the backstory, but it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Except, I mean, he does explain the ending and how the thing jumps to another host. But I still ask about the first one that we saw, the very first set of scenes. Like, I don't know, are there a bunch of these things running around now? I mean, who knows? I don't know. Anyway, and Dan's death is a good one. The Wendigo is obviously using Aiden as bait, but this just kind of begs the question as to why this thing just mangles Dan and then bam. But when Paul gets there in the next set of scenes, it's like, it's just convenient plot device, I guess. Like Nico's complaints that Ghostface kind of kills someone and then just hits another one. This kind of seems a lot like that to me. But go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I think again this is where the movie starts to turn up a little bit. I was kind of wondering when we would get the reveal, or at least the okay. There's definitely something going on at this house. Julia and the cops, finally, quote unquote, catch Frank. And I know that Frank ends up dying, but I think that this whole thing kind of blowing up and becoming something more. I was kind of wondering when that would come. It finally does. I love the scene in the hospital here between Julia and Paul. I think it's great. I wish we don't know what the dad did to Paul, and we never find out, and I don't know why.
Yep.
I think that would have added some really good character development for him and made a lot more sense. Maybe those two could have leveled a little bit with each other. Like, yeah, that's did this happen to you? But hey, this happened to me too, or whatever. Who knows? And we never find that out. I guess it's ambiguous on purpose, but I will say that's one nitpick I have. This storyline between the two of them is not fleshed out enough for my liking. And I know I've already said that, but it really shows up in this scene right here in the hospital. In this scene, you feel so bad for Lucas because, like you said, Brian, and I said it too to myself, that you don't ever see Frank be abusive. Now, Dustin made great points, and I kind of made the same ones where it's like, yeah, he wasn't hitting them. He wasn't, calling them pieces of shit. He wasn't sexually touching them, at least not that we see. But he's selling drugs. He's, doing all kinds of other shady business. And so he may not be a good person, but I never saw him abuse the child. And so it's kind of hard to say, he's an abuse victim and all this other stuff. But like I kind of mentioned, to me, the abuse, everyone else thinks it's abuse. And I think we as an audience member know that it's something completely different. It is this father-son duo becoming deer. I mean, for lack of a better term, which is, again, something I never thought I'd say. Fucking father and son becoming Bambi and Bambi's mom any fucking way. But yeah, I just think you feel so bad for the character of Lucas because, credit to him, he tried to kind of keep it together by himself, the best of his ability. He tried to keep his dad and brother alive by feeding them. He was dressing himself for school every day. He was, eating, all the stuff that a parent's supposed to do. He was doing it. So I think it's just a really fascinating character to me. And I just think that as much as I like And I'm a little bit opposite of Dustin, I think. Where the first half of the movie, I think, is really interesting. It's kind of singularly focused on the two main characters, or the three main characters, really. And then here you kind of get a little bit of craziness that's not as focused. Now we do get the explanation of the "Wake Me Up Before You Go," but it's not. Brian touched on it, and I watched it back again this afternoon. And what is the story of this thing? I know it jumps from person to person, but it doesn't have like that mythical lore. Like, take The Witch, for instance, which we watch and reviewed, and you can listen to that at
don'tgoothere.com.
We did that, and that story gave us back, a good backstory, good folklore for what came later in the film and why it mattered. And this movie doesn't do that, even here in this exposition dump scene. Like, I just wish there was more to this story from the Winnebago. And so, I think it's a good set of scenes. I just think they missed the mark on, fleshing out Julia and Paul and this thing with the Winnebago. All right. So that's all I had.
Yeah, we are opposite there because I agree the first half of the movie has a lot more story and substance as far as the backstory for Paul and Julia. But where I differ is that I just simply don't care about their backstory because it's not relevant to the actual story of this movie. This movie is called Antlers because it follows the "Where did you come from? Where did you go?" It's not called Antlers because this girl's got childhood trauma. So, anyway, I can't look at the screen when I talk sometimes because you guys make me laugh.
Oh God.
So, but this set of scenes, there's a lot of action. The pacing's a lot better. There's a lot more, stuff going on that is relevant to the title and subject matter of the movie. So that's why I'm like, yeah, this is, we kick the intensity up to 10 here. So first of all, when he's in the hospital and the doctor comes out and he says he's malnourished, like the fucking school nurse couldn't tell that when he had his shirt off after getting his ass kicked earlier in the movie. Like, you had to wait till he was actually admitted to the hospital before him. So I don't think this boy's getting enough food. What? Get the fuck out of here. And also, did y'all notice it was a little bit creepy to me how the doctor is talking to Julia and Paul in the hallway, and as he walks by, he reaches up and like weirdly grabs Paul's hand and rubs it as he walks by. Like, that was just one of those things that if it happened to me in real life, I'm like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Get off of me. But whatever. So here's where, they try to tie in that traumatic past, backstory, because when Paul and Julie are talking and she's like, he's got nowhere, and he tells him, don't put our past on him or whatever. It's like, okay, so we're trying to do something with that trauma that we've established, but I still think that the story would have worked fine if it wasn't there. So what I mean by that is that has to really be a selling point, and there has to be some kind of major blow up over it or something. Otherwise, you could have just simply said, this is a husband and a wife, and the wife saying, this is my student, we need to take him in. The husband saying, no, that's not our place. Like, it just didn't advance it enough for me. And then I'm really glad that we got the flashbacks of the dad, putting the locks and everything before he lost his hair and lost his sanity and all that, where he still had some wits about him, because I was really confused by that. I'm not gonna lie. Like, earlier in the movie, I'm like, what the fuck? How did these locks even get there? But so I'm glad we got that flashback. This is one of the times where a flashback was well done, because those can be botched. It does happen a lot of times in movies where there's random flashbacks. Like, what the fuck was the point of that? We needed this one here. I actually wish we'd have got it a little bit earlier. But it is what it is. Shout out to Rory Cochrane, or Cotrain. I'm not sure how to say his last name, but the actor that plays Dan, this whole movie I'm watching, I'm like, damn, I know him from somewhere. He was in Oculus. He was the dad in Oculus, which we reviewed. So I really like his delivery, man, and the way he talks in movies. He's got like a really dry and deliberate delivery to the way he speaks, and that's what honestly what made me remember that he was in something, and so I had to look it up. When she's inside with Lucas and she's breaking the news about his father passing away, and she's saying, my dad died. He recently did it to himself. Again, this is one of those where like, okay, some of her backstory's coming into play, but we didn't need to know that he was a pervert growing up to to empathize with her of having a recently deceased father. So it's just, I think a lot of they missed the mark for me with all of her backstory, and I don't mean to keep harping on it, but it's just it's there, so got to talk about it. And then last thing I'll touch on here is we bitch a lot about false jump scares, and jump scares are just like, we didn't need that. Holy shit, though, when Dan died, I about came out of my skin. Like I knew something was going to happen, right? He walks out and sees baby Jesus in the manger in the shed, but when the antler goes through the chest from, I should have seen it coming. I don't know why I didn't. It just really got me, and that's an effective jump scare. So hats off to all involved for that scene. But again, it's really like the last 39 minutes or so of this movie is where it's like I'm glued to my screen and really in, just because okay, there's a lot going on, action's crazy, the pacing's great. So now I'm just like, what's going on with this? Where did you come from, Cotton Eye Joe?
Hey, really quick. I know I said this thing looks great, and it does, but the antlers aren't any bigger than 8-point buck that you get on a Friday morning in the middle of the South Carolina woods. I don't know, man.
He had fucking antlers growing out his back too, though.
Anyway, I thought the antlers were a little small. That's all.
All right. Here's
and also I like. Last thing I'll say, since you mentioned the antlers and the look of I like the look of it as well. I also like that they don't overexpose the look of this.
Yeah, I agree with that.
What's the actual name of the thing again? I've said so many.
The Wendigo Your Own Way. Go your own way.
What is it?
It's a Wendigo.
Wendigo, yeah. So I like that they don't overexpose the look, because less is certainly more when you got something that looks as ridiculous as this. So I think they did a good job in that aspect as well.
Going forward, as long as it starts with a W and ends with go, I'm good with it. All right, Paul can't get Dan to radio back. Julia can't get any guns unlocked. Paul makes it home and sees Dan's body in the shed on the ground. Julia tells Lucas to not move as she watches Paul. Paul goes to the shed and then Lucas gets away. Paul finds Aiden and the Wendigo launches Paul across the shed. Aiden gets out. Paul backs up to a wall of the shed and is impaled by the Wendigo as it bashes the shed wall. Paul stabs the Wendigo, getting it off of him. Julia goes to check on Paul now. She sets him up after hearing the screeches and tends to his wounds. He asks if Lucas is dead. They went to the mine. She's going after them. He says, not by yourself you're going. She helps him up and they drive to the mines. Julia calls for an ambulance and tells them where she and Paul are. Julia goes into the mines and calls for Lucas. She walks under several medicine bags. She finds the boys in the mine and they point to the right as the Wendigo is eating a bear. The Wendigo is wearing Frank's face and roars at Julia. She shoots it and it slaps her. She now starts to shoot blindly because, of course. She lights a flare and fends the Wendigo off. She grabs a pipe and now starts to stab it in the chest. She finally gets a kill shot and it falls to the ground after Lucas stabs it in the back of the leg. Julia now removes the flaming heart from its chest. The chest is like embers as it burns her hands and she drops it to the ground. Aiden now begins to scream as he begins to turn into the Wendigo. Lucas tries to stop her. He'll be okay. He's just sick. Julia says he's not going to ever get better. I need to know you understand this. She has him stand away and not look as she walks to Aiden and hugs him. She apologizes to him as she stabs him in the back to remove his heart. Lucas holds his ears closed as we hear stabs and Aiden screaming. Cut to black and we're now by the water. Paul asks, what are we going to do with him? She says, keep him for now. We have no choice. It's like living with a tiger cub. We know what it's going to grow into. Do you think you could kill something you love? He asked her. Paul coughs now, and Lucas walks up to Julia, and they walk off. She asks if he's okay. Yeah, I'll catch up, he says as he keeps coughing. He now sees the black liquid from his eyes, and he looks up, and the film ends as the end credits roll. All right, go ahead, Brian. That's the ending.
Okay, so I already touched on the fact that Paul should have been mangled, but I mean, honestly, it's the same thing with Julia. Maybe the Wendigo was weaker in both regards from eating. So, I mean, who the hell knows? But I'll just say that. I'll just give it that. In reality, it's probably just convenient plot devices, but hey, hell, that happens in movies. But the other thing here is Hellraiser Frank face. Like, but funny, by the way, that his name's Frank too. And wait a minute, we have Julia and Frank here. I wonder if that was on purpose. Anyway, the fight with Paul looked great effects wise. They actually used a combination of practical and CG effects as well. It's just fantastic editing yet again, and I think it looked really good. But so during his Paul and Dan battle here, I couldn't really tell because it was so dark. But did he have the hanging Frank face then? Uh, I mean, I'm gonna hope yeah, because I don't really know what the hell this thing's plan was in the cave. I mean, was his plan to just chill with the boys, like one infected and one absolutely not at all, and just wear a frank face so they think it's their dad? I mean, like, I don't know. What the fuck was this Wendigo's plan? Anyway, I'm just going to leave it with this fun fact about how this heart cutting out scene was done, because again, practical, and it looked really good. Actress Kerry Russell would actually cut into the creature's chest to reach the organ. To accomplish this, Shane Mahan says, I had to put a piece of skin that was a gelatin piece and rig it and get ready to have her cut the gelatin with a knife, and then she pulls the heart out. The Wendigo doesn't really have entrails. It has brambles, thorns, and pieces of sticks and grass. So that's what comes out of it, continues Mahan. So the heart was in there, and it just had a little smoke tube in it. Had a pumping device, and she could cut the chest, pull the heart out, cut it free, and then hold the heart in her hand. That was actually really tremendously fun to do, and then you could reset it. So anyway, go ahead. That's all I had.
Yeah, I actually really like almost everything here. I think, I kind of said I like the first half of the movie better, and I do, but I think it wraps up pretty nicely here, minus the very, very end. I think everything with the Wendigo, got it right this time, trying to be a professional. I think everything with the Wendigo here is done really well. It's shot well. I think the attack on Paul, all that stuff, I think is really good. And I'll say this: the when he's wearing Frank's face or human face, that is a creepy shot, a really unique idea. Not something I expected the first time I saw the film. I was like, "What the fuck?" Um, freaking Texas Chainsaw Deer over here, man. God Almighty. Anyway, but I thought that was a really cool shot, and I think her cutting the heart out was pretty unique. Again, it didn't really. I mean, it went into that lore a little bit, not quite enough, but okay. But I think her doing that was a pretty cool scene. So sad, so freaking sad to have for Lucas to have to accept that Aiden is never going to get better, and that he had to die, and you hear it, and it's freaking tough, man. You've invested all this time in that character of Lucas, and you're hoping that things all end up great, and they do for him in a way, but he doesn't get to take his brother along with him, and that sucks, man. That is a tough thing to watch. The very end here is the only time I have an issue, and I'm not really sure what we're supposed to think with Paul being, I guess, infected now. How, why, when, where? Like, I know he got attacked, but like, he didn't die. He's been okay. Um, and there's no, if he's unless Paul is just evil, not quite sure if that's like making some statement or whatever. Like, I don't know, but I thought it was very odd to end it that way. But outside of that, I think this is really good. It's intense. It's, Kara Russell's facial expression when she realizes the scope of this thing that she's dealing with, I think is a really good shot on this film. I really love that the the shot that Cooper got there. But all in all, I think it wrapped up pretty good, minus the very, very end.
So I've got issues with the ending. I don't think it was perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I think that, well, number one, I do love, like you said, I love the the dad Frank's face being on the Wendigo. I thought that was cool. It's like he's trying to express to his kids, I'm still me. I'm not going to hurt you. I don't know. That was a nice touch there. But tell me this damn thing's been a fucking killing machine all movie, and all it takes is a school teacher who hasn't really shown that she's any bit of a badass at all, and she's going to take it out. Like that's kind of whack. The Another thing is, she's so sensitive to his trauma and trying to shield him and protect him. Like, I don't know, maybe tell him to get the fuck out of the mine, and that way he doesn't have to witness you killing his dad and brother, regardless if they're not them or not. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm over looking into that a little too much, but it is what it is. I did think that the end scene, I like how it was brighter outside than it had been pretty much all movie. More sunlight in the shot. I think that was a very nice touch to put on put a spin on it, like it's a new day. Brighter times are ahead. However, Paul's affliction at the end, I thought was the most predictable thing about the entire movie. We've seen it the whole movie, or with everybody that was afflicted earlier, was any kind of brush you have with this thing, you're going to be next. And so he got the shit beat out of him in the shed by the Wendigo. So I really saw that coming, especially the way that he was acting and everyone was acting and behaving, and that I just knew that we weren't going to get a clean, happy ending. But overall, I thought it was an okay ending. I just thought, I wish there would have been something cooler, like some more of a badass way that the Wendigo goes out. He stabbed in the chest 14 times with a big rod, and then stabbed in the back by his own son, and then his heart carved out by a school teacher. Like that doesn't strike a lot of fear in my heart. But now as I say that, but anyway, I just the movie at this point, I'm still like, okay, I really like the last 30 minutes, but the ending left a little to be desired. So do I like this movie? Stay tuned.
Really quick, I already kind of answered the fact that if I like it, but I do think this movie takes a bunch of really good things and good ideas and just doesn't quite puzzle it all together well enough.
Exactly.
And I know that's what you were saying, Brian, but I like what they did a little more than you, obviously, but they do have a bunch of really, like, it's like they had a good foundation for a home and then they just slapped a bunch of cheap sheetrock on it and painted it, bright ass yellow and called it a day. Like it's really sorry if you have a yellow home. It's just not my favorite color. It doesn't mean that you're wrong for having a yellow home. But I'm just saying, it's like, man, the guts of this thing are good, but they just don't quite gel together as well as I would want. But again, I still think it landed for me a little better than it did for Brian. But we can both agree on the same principle that a lot of good stuff here just didn't quite, make the right sandwich. It's like you put peanut butter with lettuce or some shit.
I'm really curious to hear Dustin's rating, because I've agreed so much with him, but I haven't said it out loud. But I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Dustin. For the first time in DGOT history, me and you agree, I think. Any final thoughts before we jump into our social media comments and questions? All right, we're going to knock out Twitter first. My man Hernandez Gunn, he just replied, "So boring. Took me almost 3 hours to watch." Brother, if it took you that long, I would have just quit watching it, to be honest. That's just me, though.
Well, no, I kind of get that, though, because I watched it twice to fully grasp everything, and as far as it holding my attention. So really, it took me 3 hours as well.
Sean asked, excuse me, in the original short story, The teacher is killed and the boy is taken by his father. Do you think that would have been a better ending, or did you like this one? I really don't know. I think I would have to see it on screen just to make my decision. I don't know, honestly. I would have to see it.
Yeah.
Six and one, half a dozen the other to me. Kind of the same
Well,
thing.
it depends.
Jesus
Is that just an all sad ending if it happens that way? Like teacher dies, dad keeps the boy, and then we fade to black and we don't know what happens. If so, give me that over the teacher fucking killing this powerful beast.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think I would need to see it on film like Nico. I would take this one, the one in the movie.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, Mike, on that. Kevin Scanlon, he commented, I have mixed feelings on this one. There were aspects I like, cinematography, acting, and the overall bleak feel, but I felt like the story was lacking or even had elements that were unnecessary and didn't add to it at all. I'll probably need to give it another go eventually. So I just asked him what he meant by all that, and he replied, I actually don't know about the short story either, more so the stuff with Carrie Russell and her dad. Some of the storyline was a bit depressing for me. Overall, I didn't hate the movie, but I definitely didn't love it either. Pretty much on board with you, my man.
Kevin thinks he's me. That sounds exactly how I feel.
All right, Instagram, we'll knock it out real quick. Chris, couple underscores 2020 commented, was super excited for this modern adaptation of the Wendigo folktale. While I was a little let down with the movie, I overall enjoyed it, mostly due to my interest in the Wendigo myths and lore attached. He gave it a 6 out of 10. I can see that. And the Too Close podcast commented, I actually was surprised with how this movie turned out. Love the gruesomeness and their vision of what a Wendigo looks like. That's fair. That's cool. Now we'll knock out Facebook real quick. My man Jared Summers commented, just picked this up from the library and going to try to watch it tonight. Check it out, man. I think you might like it. Kevin Potoff commented, I watched it last month on demand. Was pretty good for a new horror movie. Would I watch it again? Probably not. I think the monster effects are swell. I agree. I think the monster looked good too. And the last comment we have is, you should come up with, this is from Dave Howard, you should come up with a scale to rate movies. It could be a 10-point scale of butcher knives and add blood to the knife for each point the movie earns. Or axes. Axes would be cool. You know, I've thought about that in the past, but I feel like Dead Meat already kind of does that, and Bloodbath and Beyond kind of do unique stuff like that.
Cody Leach does that too.
I think this numerical score is good. Any more final thoughts on social media, or just jump into fun facts? Actually, I don't think we have any. Mike, you got the budget?
Okay, so this movie had a domestic box office of it's about $10,500 something dollars. And the worldwide box office total was $35,685. So
I think that was millions, right?
Sorry, that's what I meant. All up today. Yes, all that is millions, everyone. Anyway, so this movie had a very limited release, as far as I know. Not very limited, but a limited release. So maybe that had something to do with it. But I mean, it made its budget back. So, you know. Also, let's see. Doesn't have anything about an actual budget. Yeah, looks like $43 million. Is that what this says? Really?
Man, that's a lot of money for this movie.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's what I thought.
For making $35 million worldwide, that's a little rough.
Yeah. Where's the $43 million at? I don't see it.
Jesse Plemons and Carrie Russell.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of CG there too.
Yeah, there's a lot of CGI.
Yeah,
that's fair. All right, let's jump into our least favorite kill, and the rating. Does anybody in particular want to go first tonight?
It don't matter. You pick it out, Nico.
All right, I'll go
go
first.
Ahead and, go ahead.
I'll go first. I'll kick it off. I'm curious to hear what the scores are tonight. Honestly, this was a good pick, Mike. I'm excited to hear everyone's rating. Favorite kill, I chose Ellen. Great effects and a brutal way to go. Least favorite, the Wendigo. I have no problem with Julia killing the mythical beast. However, this thing just killed a bear and it looked like a wimp. At least put up a fight or something. All right, my rating, I just wrote a little paragraph. This was a movie I was looking forward to watching when I first saw the trailer. I thought it looked unique and creepy. However, after a couple watches, I will say it didn't live up to the hype I built in my head. But still a good film in my opinion. The positives, very well acted and beautifully shot. Love the scenery and the effects. Like Mike has said so many times, the mood and atmosphere was very well executed. The young man who played Lucas really made me feel for him. He was like, he pulled my heartstrings a little bit when he was, screaming and crying. Like, it was touching. I like the kills and look of the Wendigo. My negatives, this guy, I'm probably alone in this one. This guy, Paul, acted well, but just didn't look like a sheriff to me. Should have made Rory Cochrane the sheriff. Probably just nitpicking there on Paul's looks, though. Julia's backstory didn't register for me. It wasn't explained or fleshed out enough for me to care. She also frustrated me at the end, not helping Paul or keeping tabs on Lucas and blind firing the gun. Also, the Wendigo getting bullied at the end was frustrating. A lot of dumb character decisions as well. Principal should have called the cops the second she walked in that home or took police with her. Anywho, done rambling. I enjoyed the movie, liked it, didn't love it. 7 out of 10.
Wow. Let's go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off. Let's go ahead and get the mystery out of the way as far as mine goes. As far as my favorite kill, I went with Dan, just because he's the only one that was actually killed by antlers in a movie called Antlers. And it was, just a pure shock of the antlers poking. That was a hell of a jump scare. It got me. My least favorite kill, I also went with the Wendigo. Just because it's like, come on, man, you went out like a bitch. It's like watching Dark Knight Rises. I know Nico and Mike have seen that movie 100 times. When you watch The Dark Knight Rises, Bane is this badass the entire movie, and he goes out like a punk, and that's how the Wendigo went. So didn't like that. As far as my general thoughts or my summary of the movie and my thoughts, I really am conflicted. Did I like it? Did I not like it? Because the first half of the movie is very well acted and very well written, but from a horror standpoint, there wasn't enough going on to really captivate me, and all that backstory that we got, I didn't need it. It did nothing for me. It missed the mark. Then the further we get into it, the pacing picks up, but then there's a lot of like questionable decisions, and I'm glad you mentioned that about her blindly firing the gun too, because her whole thing, this whole movie is, this is my student. I'm invested in his life. I may have just shot him in the head, but I do love him. It's like, what the fuck? So I really, would I watch it again? Probably not. I agree with Kevin on that one. Like, I thought it was a well-made movie. The cast is phenomenal. The directing, the cinematography, the score. I really love the score. This is one of my favorite scores that we've done in a while, I think. But it wasn't very enjoyable for me. Doesn't have rewatchability. I'm gonna go with a 5 1/4.
I'll go ahead and go so Mike can go last on his movie. So best looking death, I assume Frank dies when the Wendigo comes out of him. Who knows, but I'm counting it. Least favorite death, bully kid from Christmas Story. Just wish they would have put a little bit more on screen there. Like I said, the two paths of trauma don't really work for me. Again, they kind of seem shoehorned together just to kind of create a bond between the two. There's a lot of plot holes for me, and I can look past that if the movie is fun to watch. And this one just isn't. Well, I mean, it just wasn't fun to watch for me. I gave it a 4.5.
Yeah, my favorite kill was Ellen because it was brutal and we got to actually see it for the most part. And I like the way that particular death was shot. My least favorite is also the bully kid because I wanted to see more. I think it's a shame that we didn't get to see his actual comeuppance. Kind of said everything I need to say. I think I kind of described it perfectly at the end of the last set of scenes, where I think there was a lot of good pieces that they just didn't quite fit together. But I still really liked what the movie did, what the movie said. I love the way it's made. Everything about the way it's made is really good to me. The direction, the cinematography, the music, just like that dreary feeling you get the entire film, I think is really good. And the acting to me is top notch, hands down, for a horror film. I think this cast is really, really good. All of that being said, I gave this a 6.75.
All right, so that puts our composite rating at a 5.875.
God damn.
But I do like this movie.
No,
it isn't super rewatchable. It's just not.
The funny thing is, I mean, IMDb has it as a 5.9. We were like right on with him.
That's what I was laughing about. Like, we basically nailed it.
Yeah. It's so funny though, because I really didn't know what score was coming out of my mouth until I said it. Like all day, I actually wrote, I put 2 points on the number line, and I was like, my score will not be below this, but it cannot be above this. And all day I've been back and forth, like, where am I going to put? And then I started talking. I was like, 5.25. Like it just felt natural. So
One last thing before we got out of here, before we talked about next week's episode, I wanted to give out a shout out to a dear friend of mine, Becky, who started a podcast with her friend Jennifer. It's a true crime pod called Too Close to Home. I listened to it at first because Becky's a friend of mine, but I'm shouting it out here because I truthfully do think it's very good. So if you're into true crime, definitely check that out. It's called Too Close to Home. I think they're doing a great job right out of the gate with that one. So that's all I had.
Awesome. Yeah, y'all check that out.
Sounds good, man.
I'm going to shout out our blood donors, then I'll announce my pick for next week. Our blood donors, our camp level reoccurring, are Clayton J., Nina, Michelle Mirza, Andrew Ferguson, Carrie Adams, the Horror Movie Crew podcast, Alex Seligson, Eric Doolittle, and Sean Irwin. Our camp counselor reoccurring are Hunter Nelson, Karen, Dennis Kennedy, Edwin Hernandez Gunn, and Joe Swinford. Really appreciate y'all. Our legendary blood donors, y'all check out her pick. We just dropped it a couple weeks ago, Missy Hutchinson Wall. And the upcoming ones we have to do are with Sean and Sarah Irwin. And we just dropped Final Girl donor Danny Cnap's Grave Encounters review. We just dropped it a couple of days ago. So make sure you check that episode out as well. Just want to say thank you to all of our blood donors. I really appreciate y'all. Y'all help us out a lot.
Absolutely.
All right. To continue in our Never Seen It month, we're going to be taking on 2019, I think. 2019's Ready or Not. It's going to be our second Samara Weaving movie this month. And it's going to be our second, was Adam Brody. Like, he was in a movie last month, Jennifer's Body, that we did. So some familiar faces. Heard nothing but good things about this movie. So I'm looking forward to reviewing it next week. Any thoughts on that real quick before we get out of here?
I agree. I'm looking forward to it too. I haven't seen it yet either.
Yep.
Love it.
All right. Just want to thank all our fans and listeners one more time. We really appreciate y'all. Thank you for all your support, and wake me up before you go. Just want to remind everybody.